Okay, we're going to focus on writing ratios as fractions, and I'm going to give you three different problems. And the first two you should be familiar with because if you've been in my class for a while, we've done some work with whole numbers. Also, we've done some work with fractions. And we recently did some work with decimals, but there's a little variation on the decimal one that I'm going to probably present most of my examples. But first, let's start with whole numbers. We're comparing two items. So let's say that so write down whole numbers. Okay. So as if we're, 3 is a whole number, so is 2. And let's say there's three females to 2 males. Okay. And so our ratio is 3 to 2, or 3 halves. As a fraction, we might say that 1/2 of the class is 1/2, let's say 1/2 of Mr. Brown's class. Okay, so Mr. Brown, and then 1/3 of Ms. Jones' class are going on a field trip. Okay, so here we're comparing two things, Mr. Brown's class and Mrs. Jones' class, or Ms. Jones' class. But remember, we're going to write this kind of as a complex fraction, so it'd be 1/2 over 1/3. And so we'll go ahead and reduce or simplify this by dividing. Hopefully you're remembering this. Okay, remember we got to flip the second one and multiply, so 1/2 times 3 over 1, and then we get 3 halves. So in this case, the 3 is going to represent Mr. Brown's class, and the 2 will be Ms. Jones' class. So how we would read that is for every 3 students from Mr. Brown's class, 2 students from Ms. Jones' class are going to be going on the field trip. Now the last example is with decimals, and I want to give you a few examples regarding this because this is new material right here. So sometimes you might have, like say you're baking and you'll have 1.5 cups or 1.5 cups of sugar to 3 cups of flour. Okay, or 1.5 parts of sugar to 3 parts flour. It doesn't necessarily have to be cups. Okay, notice that we have a decimal here in our first term, and generally speaking, we don't want to work with decimals and fractions. So we want to eliminate it, and what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both terms by the same value to get rid of that decimal. Now, if I move that decimal over one place, I'll get rid of that decimal. But if I don't do the same thing down here, I'm going to change the value of this ratio. So I want to multiply both terms by the same number. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 10. And I'm choosing 10 because, again, if I move it over one space to the right, that's essentially me multiplying by 10. And if you're a little confused by this, go back and review my video lesson on multiplying with decimals, or multiplying decimal numbers by 10, 100, 1,000, and so on. Okay, so this can be rewritten as 15 over 30. And then, of course, we can reduce. That's going to become 1/2. So for every part of sugar, we're going to have 2 parts flour. So sugar, flour. Okay, let's do a couple more of these. Grab another piece of paper. All right. Okay. Now I'm just going to play with the numbers here and not worry so much about the values, you know, what they represent, but I just want to give you some more examples. So say we've got 0.4, and we're comparing that to 24 of something. Again, notice this top term has a decimal place, this one doesn't. We're always going to figure out we're going to always adjust for the highest place value being used. So here we've got tenths. That's a little bit, or, you know, since this is already does not have the place value, we're going to focus here. We want to go over 1. So that means we're going to multiply by 10, both, and then do the multiplication. We get 4, and we get 240 here. And I know 4 goes into 24 6 times, so 4 goes into 240 60 times. That's going to be 1 over 60. Let's try another one. Let's say we've got 45 hundredths, and we're going to compare that to 45 hundredths of something. Now, if we multiply by 10, that's only going to bring it over 1 decimal place. So we want to actually bring it over 2 places, and that's the same thing over here. We want to bring it over 2 places. So I'm going to multiply by 100. And that's going to change that to 45 over 45. And I could reduce that. 45 goes into 45 1 time. So I've got 1 over 1. But again, I'm just going to leave it here. Don't change it to 1. Okay? That would be incorrect. Because again, these values have some kind of, they're representing something like cats to dogs or whatever. You can think of an example. Let's do one more. Let's say we've got 1 and 25 hundredths to, we'll make it interesting. Let's go 5 thousandths. Okay. So again, we want to look at both. This one, if we move it over 2, we'll eliminate that decimal point. However, if I only go to 2, I'm still going to be 0.5 here. So I want to actually multiply by 1,000. So both of them, I'm going to multiply by 1,000. And then I'll rewrite it. So 1, 2, and then 1 more. So 1, 2, 5, 0. So 1,250. And then over 5. Now I can reduce, I know 5 goes into this because it ends in 0. I know, well actually I know, I don't know that. So 5 goes into 12 twice, with 2 left over. 5 goes into 25 5 times, and then the 0. So 250 over 1. And again, I don't want to convert that to just 250 because, there's a value, there's a descriptive value here saying here. So, we need to keep that